So how good do you think your palate is? That's a good question. And sometimes it's kind of fun to test it out and really see where you fall on things. How well do you know your whiskeys? Well, I'm going to give myself a little test here today. It's not the first blind I've ever done on the channel. I've done a few of them, and I've done fairly well in those blinds. But I want to keep pushing my limits a bit here. And I figured a fun way to do that would be to actually blind some whiskeys that I've never had before. So these are 4 whiskeys on the tabletop tonight that I have never tried before. But not only that, they are barrel picks of those whiskeys to take it even a step further. So there could be some variation between these samples and the traditional product that they represent that you might find on the shelf somewhere. So these samples were sent to me by Matt Warren. Matt, thank you so much, brother. You've been extremely generous and sent me a lot of cool stuff so far. So I'm going to blind these, but before I do, I'll tell you what's on the tabletop. I don't know which bottle is which. My wife does, but I don't. So I will tell you what's represented here. So we'll go off what we know about these whiskeys. So just the basic information about them, who makes them, what the mash bills are like, how old they are, what the distillation process was like, or how they wanted to set their product apart from the others. And then I will blind taste them. I'll take notes on what I think I'm pulling out of each of these, and then ultimately I'll make a guess as to which is which based on just the basic write-up of the product. Does that sound good? Okay, so I've got my notes here because my brain does not hold information very well unless I cram that information into it over and over and over again, which is why most of the books on whiskey that I've read most of them 3 to 4 times at least. One of them I've read 6 times because my brain needs it or else it won't retain it. Anyways, what's on the tabletop tonight? We have one of these is 6 and 20 is the name of the distillery, and they're in South Carolina. And the whiskey from their distillery that's here is the Old Money Wheat Whiskey. But again, it's a barrel pick that was done by a local group. And I don't know how that barrel might differentiate from the standard product, but they describe it as being maple, caramel, and vanilla. Those are honestly pretty generic flavors that you pull out of American whiskeys anyway, because all of those flavors are in oak wood in the barrels. So that might be a challenge. But here's the one thing that might help it stand out against the others is that I know that it's all wheat and barley. Now, they didn't disclose the mash bill, so I'm assuming it's probably a 95-5 split, but it could be a 90-10. It could be 85-15. I don't know. But most of it is just going to be wheat. So I shouldn't get any rye or corn influence on the palate, but we will see. So the distiller apparently wanted to make a whiskey that was palatable to his wife. He's like, I want my wife to be able to enjoy whiskey with me. I bet I can make a product that she'll drink. So that's the story behind that one. Next up, there's going to be Blue Note, their Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Now, this was a barrel pick done by r/bourbon over on Reddit. I've bought several of their picks myself and have several of them on my shelf. But we know that Blue Note's mash bill is 70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley. So on their website, they describe it as having sweet corn, allspice, and pear influences. Now, this is distilled in Memphis, and it has a 3-year age statement on it, minimum. So we've got a wheater, we've got a Kentucky Straight Bourbon, and third on the table is going to be a rye. So it's going to be the Old Pepper Straight Rye, and it is all rye. I mean, the mash bill is 95% rye, 5% malted barley, so no corn influence in there at all. It's aged 3 to 4 years minimum, and they describe it as having influences of clove and mint and eucalyptus even, and some chocolate, so that might be kind of interesting too. Now, the last bottle on the table tonight is something I think will probably stand out pretty easily, but again, we'll see. I don't want to overestimate my palate. But it comes out of Georgia from 13th Colony, and it's a double oaked bourbon. Now, I don't know about the barrel pick itself, but traditionally they serve this up at cask strength, which is like 135 plus proof. So it's pretty hot in the alcohol department. It also traditionally carries a 9-year age statement, and at least 2 of those years are it being finished in a toasted maple wood barrel. So it's going to be the oldest whiskey on the table tonight by a landslide, and it was finished in a toasted barrel. So I think the profile on that one and the heat of the alcohol should probably make it stand out pretty well. So having said that, it'll be really embarrassing if I get that one wrong. Now, I'm going to crack the seals on these. I've done no work ahead of time to like sniff them out and try and identify anything. I'm realizing that this is going to be backwards for you. I thought I had done that correctly, but now that I'm thinking about it, I did not. So it's going to be over here is A, and then B, C, and D. So, knowing what I know about these, let's see if I can identify them. But first, I'm not going to be thinking about identifying them. I'm just going to be interested in tasting them and seeing what I'm able to pull out of these. Alright, we're starting over here with A. I definitely get the sweet vanilla and caramel up front. And then a little bit of like a floral aroma as well. Maybe even some yellow fruits like your nectarines or something like that. Maybe some melon. Let's try it. Oh, wow. Not a lot of caramel on the palate. A lot of like dried apricot. But it's also really tannic, and that could be maybe an indication of age. But nothing about it is offensive. But that's pretty tasty. I'm going to take notes as I go so I can refer back to them. Let's move on to the next one. B. Very different nose on this one already. That one was fruity and floral. This one's roasty and caramely. Maybe like cashews as well on the nose. Somewhat nutty. Semi-viscous. Coats the glass a little bit there. Let's try it. It's not got a lot of like the dark, rich, roasty characteristics that the nose had on the palate, though. The proof feels pretty timid, maybe in the low 90s, high 80s. Caramel, vanilla, oak, and a hint of spice to it. Like a little bit of allspice. That's a pretty crushable whiskey right there, I think. That goes down very easy. Caramel, oak, and allspice. No fruit influence like we had on the first one. Alright, let's move on to the third. Oh, that nose is so much different. Whoa! Hey-oh! I know this sounds like a bad note, but it's not necessarily offensive. But it smells to me like permanent marker on the nose. A hint of sweet vanilla. But I can tell you on the nose, that does not smell like bourbon. But yeah, that permanent marker vibe coming through very strong. And a hint of sweet vanilla, maybe even a little bit of honey. Let's try it. That is so soft. It's very delicate. Really floral with a little bit of sweet honey. It almost reminds me of like a honeysuckle. I don't know if you remember honeysuckles. When I was a kid, we had a couple of big honeysuckle bushes right outside the front door. And I would go out there as a kid and grab those flowers off, and you pull the stem through the flower and it grabs the nectar when it comes through. And then you just lick the nectar off the tip of it. And they were called honeysuckles. I don't know if that's just a Midwest thing or not. I don't know. But that's what this reminds me of. It's very, it reminds me of honeysuckles in the spring. Just that sweet nectar off of a flower in like a cool morning, but not cold. That's the vibe I get off of this. 3 very different experiences so far. And now we move on to the last one, D. A lot of brown sugar, maple syrup, like maple syrup over pancakes, and dry oak. That's what I get on the nose of that. Maple syrup over pancakes, dry oak, and brown sugar. That's a pretty delightful nose, honestly. That reminds me of Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. Let's taste it. A ton of brown sugar and oak. Like right there. After that initial sip, it sits there on your tongue for a second, and then you get that sweet maple that comes in. And then after that, it's all wood. Just sweet wood. It's like you had a slab of maple wood, and he took some brown sugar grains. He just rubbed it into the wood grain, and then he just took a lick, which I don't recommend you do because it sounds like a really good way to get a bad splinter. But that's what it tastes like. It doesn't quite taste like Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, but I think there's two reasons for that. This is clearly a higher proof than Woodford Double Oaked. Woodford has a lot of the brown sugar that comes through and a lot of oak. This is giving me more maple, high proof, but very sweet. I'm pretty sure I know which one that one is. Okay, just to quickly recap, we had this one, which was fruity, peppercorns, sweet fruit, a little bit tannic, a dry mouthfeel. Then we had number 2, or letter B rather, which was caramel, oak, and allspice. Then we had number 3, which was delicate, reminded me of honeysuckles in the spring, floral, sweet nectar. And last we had what I think is very high proof, really rich, brown sugar, maple, and oak. It's time to guess. So we have the 6 and 20 Old Money Wheat Whiskey. We have the Blue Note Bourbon. We have the Old Pepper Straight Rye. And we have the 13th Colony Double Oaked. So here are my picks. I think A is our rye whiskey. I think that's Old Pepper Straight Rye. So I'm going to write this down. I think this is A. B, I think this is our Blue Note Bourbons, the 70% corn, 21% rye. I think C here, number 3, this is going to be our wheat whiskey. I think that's our 6 and 20 Old Money Wheat Whiskey. And last but not least, I think the dark one on the table that's really rich, I think that's our 13th Colony Double Oaked. So I think D for Double Oak. D for Double Oak, B for Bourbon. I think A is our Old Pepper Rye. And then I think that C is our 6 and 20 Wheat Whiskey. Those are my picks. Let's go get the envelope, and we'll see if I'm right. Here we go. So, this is the 13th Colony Double Oaked Bourbon. I said this was D. It is D. So that one we got correct. Da, 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 da. We are 1 for 1. This is the Old Pepper Straight Rye Whiskey, 110 proof. Ooh, this has got a little bit more proof on it. Oh, wait, timeout before we go. What was the proof on the 13th Colony? Yeah, 135.3. That's why it had that proof on it. So, Old Pepper Straight Rye, I said was A. It says, oh, C. It says it was C. I think I may have got the rye and the wheaters mixed up. So, Blue Note Bourbon, I said was B. It is B. Blue Note Bourbon, B for Bourbon. So, we got the bourbon right. Ba, ba, ba. And the 6 and 20 Old Money Wheat Whiskey, I said was C. And it is actually A. So, yes, that is correct. So, my rye and my wheat, I got backwards. That's actually really surprising to me considering the notes I was getting out of these. So, I was 2 out of 4 here. Now, again, I've never had any of these before, so I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. But let me talk to you about the ones I got right. Obviously, I think the easiest pick here was D, was the double oaked. It was dark, it was rich, had all those double oaked flavors, and I like a lot of double oaked products. So that one was not too hard to pick out. The bourbon, the Blue Note Bourbon, I drink a lot of bourbon. Like most of what's up there is bourbon on my shelf. Not all of it, but most of it's bourbon. So I'm used to those bourbon quintessential flavors. You know, your caramels and butterscotch and that sweetness that you get off of a bourbon product. So that one wasn't too bad. Now, the reason I picked what I picked here was because with what I thought was the rye, I was getting a lot of those sweet fruit influences. And that made me think rye, because I have a lot of ryes on my shelf that are mostly rye. When you get a lot of corn in there, it changes the flavor up a bit. But if it's mostly rye in the mash bill, a lot of times I get those apricot, dried yellow fruit flavors. I was definitely getting that out of this wheater. I look forward to doing more blinds in the future, because honestly, blinds are a lot of fun for me. It's really fun to go into a product and try and pick things out of it and identify it. based on what you know about whiskey. And obviously, the more you do it, the more practice you get, the more you're going to be able to identify and pick out flavors. So a lot of people are like, I don't think my palate's really good. Do some lineups like this where you're not doing a full pour. Just do a splash of several different whiskeys. Read the labels. Find out what makes that product unique. And then as you're tasting that whiskey, you're going to start identifying. It's so much easier to pull out those identifying features when you have it next to other whiskeys too. And you'll be able to identify, okay, this one says that they did a double oaked process. And so you're going to be able to compare on the palate that product next to another one that wasn't double oaked. And you can see where the difference lies. So the next time you taste something without knowing what it is, you'll be like, oh, this reminds me of that double oaked I had. Lo and behold, the person might be like, yo, that's a double oaked product. And you're like, haha, bazinga. The more you try things side by side, the more you're going to be able to pick out those identifying features. So do it. Thanks again, Matt, for your generosity. These were really tasty drinks. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys so much. We'll catch you in the next video. Be well. Bye-bye.